Good morning. Welcome to Quick and Early Miracles. Today I will be talking about praying or meditation. And I don't know why I did this with my hands, but I think if I did know, I would say that it's because at earlier versions of myself would not have been open to hear the word pray, which may sound crazy to you, but my experience of it's kind of like I discounted all things that had the word God, Jesus, or pray in it until I was much deeper into my questioning and living. But for a long time, those words were very off-putting to me. And I think in some ways I expect them to be that off-putting for others. That's always, I say God, and then I run up behind it and I say well, what I mean is infinite intelligence, all that is, divine grace, the universe. I try to life force, all that is. I try to tie those words to concepts that maybe didn't come with them if you learned them at like a church camp. And if the words are, let's say, like itchy to you, pick a different word, sub it in. When I read the Bible, when I read A Course in Miracles, you can interchange the word life for God, love for Jesus. There are ways to kind of read it as it's actionable, using whatever word you don't have resistance to. So when I'm talking about praying, it's actually the same thing in my mind as meditation, where you come into union with yourself and what is true, which is the same as silence, which is the same as acknowledging you don't know, which is the same as bringing your mind, hi Dwayne, thanks for coming over to this one, as same as bringing your mind into, not submission, but allowance of the infinite mind. So when you are, let's say, and here's my illustration of that. When you bring your mind, the mind of God is infinite. And by that, I mean, it's not bound by learned ideas, and it doesn't attempt to fit into any type of construct that would be necessary for understanding. And no matter how open-minded you are, how great at thinking you are, you're still not ever able to contemplate all that is. One, because you're a part of all that is. Two, because when you bring things into a thinking system, you take them out of their natural environment. It would be the same as if you were in a rainforest and you wanted to study the frog. If you take the frog, to the lab, you're no longer studying the frog of the rainforest because the frogs are moved from its environment. When you think, it's the same thing. You take something out of its environment, you bring it into a lab experience, and when you interact with it in the lab, you're not really interacting with what you saw in the forest because it's no longer a part of all that is. In the forest, no matter how closely you studied the frog, you can continually zoom out on the effects that things had on the frog in a way that you ultimately would see. You can't know. Meaning, let's say that the frog has a particular plant or bug it, does stuff with. If you're okay, well, see, I'm able to contemplate the environment of the frog. I know that it needs this leaf. I know that it needs this bug. Well, then you have to zoom into the bug. Where's the bug come from? What's the bug need? Where's the leaf come from? Where's the leaf? What's the leaf need? And you keep going back to all these things. And that kind of zoom discovery method is another way to find forgiveness for some of the people that have hurt you, because you can see that while they were the leaf or they were the bug, when you kind of zoom in, you see that, well, behind them was this event, behind that or these people, behind those people or this thing. And ultimately, all of those causes come back to the misperception of separation. And the suffering the misperception of separation is what generates suffering. So when I'm talking about, like, it doesn't take the event away, it takes the meaning of the event away, and it brings it to a higher place. So praying or meditation is recognizing that you don't know, like, you can't know. And so much of your current suffering is a result of the meaning that you apply to what's happening. And meaning is saying, I know where this is going. I know what this says about me. I know what this says about my future. I know how this fits in my overall life story. And it could be something as simple as, like, you get a letter in the mail, and the letter in the mail says, you owe $400 out of nowhere. You might think that's a bad thing, but let's say in the reception of that letter, you had kind of like, you got a little upset, and you said, you know what, I have to get my shit together, and I'm gonna go start generating money this new way. And so this letter that was bad actually connected you with energy to pursue an opportunity that you've really been wanting to but haven't. And that's the way, going back to like the Zoom thing, when something occurs, when there's an event in life or something that's in front of you, the mind is like, don't worry, I know what this means. And the mind, its main role in this experience, when it's like chattering, is to warn you of stuff. And it warns you based on what it's seen and what it believes to be true. And that's really not the best narration. It's like having, a pirate on your shoulder, and every time, no matter what happens, the pirate's like, oh, matey, be careful for them, because the pirate isn't really doing anything except making you feel anxious about neutral things, or maybe things that could be really enjoyed if they were unpackaged or allowed. Good morning. So meditation and praying is really aligning your mind with God's or infinite intelligence or the universe and all that is, and saying, like, I don't know. Like, that means that when you go to that place, when you go to meditate, you're not showing up saying, take this letter away from me. You're not saying anything about what is, because you really don't even know what to ask for, like, relative to the experience that's here. So most of our thinking, it has like a lot of because energy. And the because energy, and I talk about this in other broadcasts, is largely invisible. It's the motor behind the boat. If you're over here at the front of the boat, you're not able really to see what's moving you. And that's the same as our beliefs. They're why we're thinking what we're thinking about. You hear what you're thinking, but you don't hear the framework that exists that makes you think you gotta think about that. And something like a simple example of that would be, let's say that you didn't know that what you were wearing was important. Well, then you're not really thinking about it. But let's say that you have a belief, you have a learned belief that the brands or trendiness or timeliness of what you're wearing indicates your worth or presents you to others in a way that makes you valuable or lovable or whatever. So you don't know, you're the guy at the head of this boat then is thinking, like, where do I want to go shopping? What do I want to get? He's not hearing, hey, you need to get a nice suit so that people love you. Most likely it just comes across as the activity. How do I satisfy what I think needs to be satisfied? And when you're coming into praying, because energy is kind of counterproductive, because the point is really just to be, period. If you're coming in, if you're coming into prayer or meditation with anything other than this, then all you're really doing is emphasizing the direction that your motor wants to go. And your motor is away from what's true, because your motor is not, if you're motoring away from something or towards something, you're still not really allowing of the moment. Let's see if I can expand on that. There's probably more of a hybrid of that experience, and in this conversation, let's let motors be beliefs that are about how to get what you already are. So they would be beliefs about how to establish worthiness, how to feel safe, how to be enough, beliefs that you wouldn't have except for that somewhere, shape, or form there is a disconnect from God. You're not the whole way allowing of the river and truth of life. So those kind of motors drive you towards things that are learned. That means that someone taught you somewhere that this thing means that thing. And because you want to establish worth, you pursue that thing. It wouldn't seem valuable in isolation. You wouldn't care about it except for that. You think that it means this. And because of that, it's like playing a game, a very arbitrary game. And someone gives you the rules and they say, like, to win, you need to get 15 of these little gold duck trophies, and you need to get 12 of these Subway sandwiches. It's just nothingness. But because the game has been constructed in a way that you believe that the gold ducks and the Subway sandwiches mean something, that changes how the choices that you make on the board. So a lot of the misery or suffering I see in our culture comes from people buying into the idea that the gold duck and the Subway matters, and they organize the Subway sandwiches matter, and they organize all of their effort and activity around the attainment of those things, where those things aren't meaningful in and of themselves, especially to the individual. They've just been taught to hold meaning. And so their motor is like, how do I get this? Where do I get that? They think that it's not important. But if they didn't think that, they wouldn't go there. So when, like, as a human being, and I'm not sure I'll be able to put this in words, but, there is a quality of existence when you really connected to, like, the awareness of who you are, it's like, ain't nothing higher, really. It feels like, at this point from my experience, it's like, it feels like love, like your whole body's on love. And that's just the allowance of the natural state. That's not your mind saying, hey buddy, to feel good, you have to be 5 pounds, thicker. You have to have these things. Like, the mind isn't interfering with what you would feel naturally by providing obstacles for you to overcome to feel that way. And I want to emphasize that this alignment, that awareness, that allowing, like turning that faucet on and saying, like, okay, I'll feel that, I'll allow that in. You don't have to do it for like hours. You don't have to spend, weeks at an ashram. You can, and it can be helpful, but you can also allow just 1 second of it, just a splash of water from the fountain of like a quiet mind. And a quiet mind doesn't mean, it can take some time to really get the mechanisms that's like spit thought to slow down. They're almost like ticker tape. And I don't know if anybody who is like born past the 1990s would know what ticker tape is. I'm not even really sure I know what it is, but it's kind of, from what I understand, it's like this printout of like a stock number from whenever Wall Street used paper to like manage things. It's just kind of like just spitting out all this paper. And the mind, when it gets in the habit of thinking, it's not necessarily anybody's still cranking, the ticker tape machine. It's just like, it's it's got so much momentum that just goes on its own. And so a lot of our mental activity is just habit. It's just patterns. And that's when I'm working with a client too, that's one of the fastest leverage points, is to say like, hey, you think this is a problem, but it's not anything, it has nothing to do with you. It's just something you learn to do. It's kind of like if you learn to, if you learn choreography, that's like when the beat drops, like you do a ball change, like kick ball change move, and you've done that for 30 years, when the beat drops, like you do it. But you only do it because you learned to do it. It has nothing to do with you. It's just, you just relearn some of these stimulus response patterns. And, so with the thinking and meditation and praying, maybe you got lots of like momentum up here. Maybe there are a bunch of different machines spitting out all this thought about groceries, about your dad, about where you might go for vacation, or why you didn't go to a vacation, and how, like there could be these paper trails just like all the time in your head, that you don't need to wait till they're all gone for you to have just like one moment. And it doesn't have to even be with, those things can all be happening, and you almost like rise above them and know that they're not real. That's all. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to stop. You don't have to have like a quiet mind. You just have to have quiet acceptance that none of that matters for a moment. That's why this little guy I have set up as, I don't know, it's because he recognizes that all the thoughts that he's having aren't really the factual interpretations he thinks they are. And so that would be the same as like, let's say you're at home and your kid comes home and they're like telling you about this imaginary friend they have, and how the imaginary friend got in trouble with its imaginary grandma. And, you're taking in all that information, but you're not saying like what needs to be done. You're just witnessing it. And it's the same thing with your thoughts. And in the I Am Radio broadcast series, I talk a lot about the unreality of thinking and the illusion of understanding. And it's a little unsettling at first, at least it was for me, to come to a place where I'm like, oh shit, I'll never be able to figure this out. It can't be. And as soon as I crossed that threshold, things started to really get easier, because I stopped looking for something I can't find. And that's a really nice feeling. And so that also loosens the grip of the mind, because you start to notice when the mind's spinning those papers and doing all that activity, that it doesn't mean what you think it means. One of my best friends growing up, I think her imaginary friend was named Grandma Kemosabe. And it just came to me, like, you don't have to do anything about those, what you think you need to do. And I'll talk more about that in a different Quick and Early series, but it's all like in accordance with the illusion of thinking. There is an illusion of doing, and an illusion of how things are done and how things happen. Very briefly, it would be, let's say that you ordered Uber Eats once, and it came in a car, and so you think like you're out. You ordered Uber Eats again. You're sitting outside your house. You're waiting for it. You're looking at every car. You don't see the guy on the bicycle because you don't think to look for one. And those kind of, like, we think in terms of what we know. What we know isn't everything. It's barely even anything. And so it's that recognition of noticing when you're really desperately grasping to an avenue that you think things come from. Money, love, validation, etc. You're really holding tightly because in your mind you're like, Uber Eats uses cars. But there are so many other different vehicle types. They could come on a scooter. It's okay to allow for things to arrive in new and like even kind of miraculous ways. And so that will be a different live, and just really unpacking how we attach to these different, I call them causal chains. And it's when we think that this, this, this. It's like, I need to do this for this, and then this. It's like these domino configurations we create when there are a billion ways to knock over the last one. And we get really uptight and connected to or attached to what we think, how we think the dominoes need to be configured. So much so that we're not with the domino that we're placing, or we're not with the point. The point of maybe setting up all those dominoes to get the last one would be for you to feel happy and at peace. And if you're not happy and at peace setting up the dominoes, like, are you achieving your main goal? So that's another way to really loosen the grip of the mind, is when you call yourself into awareness of what you really trying to do. Like, what's this really about? What's your main point? If your main point of being in a relationship is to share the experience of love, like, that point should follow you everywhere. Not should, but like, why wouldn't it? You know, whether you're in disagreement or whether you're, you know, and so whatever is happening there, like, if the main point isn't with you, like, what's your point? And that is another way to kind of like clear the illusions of the mind. It's so wild to see how much love and peace and possibility exists when you don't have all of this stuff that's unreal telling you that it's not. And the unreality of it is just as simple as recognizing that the interpretation that you apply to what somebody has done isn't why they did it. It's not. So you can get yourself all in a tizzy about what something means and why it means and how dare they, and they must, you know, but for what? That might not even be how they think. You might not even be able to to understand how they think. They could tell you, this was my reasoning. It wouldn't make sense to you. It doesn't mean it's not real. The reasoning that they share might not even be the reasoning behind it. Like I was talking about and zooming in the Amazon, you know, like they could very confidently say, I did this because of this. But when you zoom a little, there's always stuff behind it. So no one even really knows why they do stuff. It's quite illuminating to allow yourself to explore what you think you're doing when you're thinking. And that is, and so let's say in contrast to that, if you're not with that type of information, where are you? You're right here. You're right here. You're right here. And this is where things are happening. This is where you affect change. This is what you're here for. And so when you're not with all of this false information, you can make a new choice. You can, center into yourself. You can be presented with something. You say, what do I want? Like, what's here? What might be best? What would be amazing? And that takes you out of all of like the interpretations of what this could be, or, it's just very simple. Like, it's a pink marker. All right. I come upon the pink marker. It doesn't have to have anything to do with all the pink markers before, what I saw about pink markers on TV. It has nothing. It's this pink marker right now. And you allow yourself to say, like, well, what do I want to do with this one right now? And that takes you above the illusion. Okay. And I do help people kind of sort those things out. If you're interested in working with me, when I am taking a client through the process, I'm not adding anything to them. I'm just helping them see that some of the thinking patterns and patterns of identifying that they have aren't real. That's it. You kind of just like you lift up like the Wizard of Oz thing, and you're like, look, it's just this guy, and then it doesn't hold the same power over you because you don't give it to it. So today I talked about praying or meditation, which is aligning with a sense of knowing you don't know, which means in that place, in that space, you don't have to think. You can allow yourself to rise above the thoughts that you have and to feel refreshed, kind of like being aligned with or at one with the mind, infinite mind of God, where you don't need to think yourself into different solutions. You don't have to. You recognize you can't, and you start to make space for for infinite intelligence to work. Hi. Thanks for coming. I really enjoyed your live yesterday. I was glad I dropped in. And what I'm emphasizing is You know, when you're there, there's no other reason than to just be there. It's like, it's the difference between exercising to be like bikini bod and exercising because it feels fucking good to move. You know, there's whatever, I posted this in my story the other day, a quote about you can't run from yourself. You can't escape, you know, your intention. If you're coming at anything, eating, sleeping, kissing, working from a place of fear, then it goes into your, like, that's kind of embedded in the experience, like the seed that you plant. There's no reason to do it but to do it. And if you allow that, and that's something too I can kind of prove out logically, and that might be a different live, but it's really letting yourself see in a world of infinite possibilities, whatever you're doing is what you're choosing to do. And if you're choosing to do it, like allow yourself to be there for it, and to let it be a celebration of God and life and love, because this is your moment. Do the moment. This is your moment. Like, this is your moment. It can be whatever you want, whatever you bring into your moment. So going back to the idea of the, you know, Uber drivers, you're not really being sure what anything means. Let's say in your moment you have this job you've been in for 15 years and you think it's stupid and you hate to go and it drains your soul. Part of what makes you miserable is that you assume that means you're going to be there tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and that it means you didn't allow for your dreams. It means, and so you bring all of these ideas into your moment when you really don't know, and when you hold them in your moment through emotion that you're being hesitant to feel, or like perpetual thought patterns, they stay, and then the moment goes with you. But if you allow that, it's possible. And I did an interview with Dr. Dwayne Hartman that'll be out, I think he said this week, and I can't remember if he said it during that or a pre-call. I think he said it during our chat. He's like, you just need a notion. It can be different. A notion. Maybe I could get, maybe tomorrow when I show up, I'll be assigned a project that has a ramp towards finding what I really, you know, whatever is meaningful work to me. Or maybe, you know, there is a shift in the human resource tree and I get to move to Hawaii. Like, what if you allow possibility into your moment, then the things that you don't want aren't as heavy because you're not pushing them out into time and space. One of the presentations I gave last week was like, the fort, getting your fort. When you are in a brainstorm, a lot of mental activity, one of the components is you're taking what is and you're extrapolating it into all of time and space. What will this mean about how those people think about me? What will it mean about how, will I always, never? You know, those words are heavy, and they attach themselves kind of like very sneakily and secretly to what's happening. So it's not just about them not being able to hear you right now. It's about, will they never hear you? You know, so you got to like kind of pull off those little parasites and let it just be this right now, this moment right now. Any questions, thoughts, feelings, comments before I close for today? Oh, I was talking to, like, with the because motor, you know, so much of our thinking is really, you know, orchestrated or conditioned and programmed from our media outlets, and they could be film, television, you know, the news, print, like all of that goes into our mental frameworks. It creates this game that we don't think we're playing, but we're essentially playing, where someone says, these are the things that are important. You have to go collect as many of them as possible. And that because motor drives you towards things you wouldn't go to, except you think you have to because they mean this thing. And so the more you're in this place, the more you practice this state of awareness, I don't know, and allow your mind to align with that of God's, the freer you are of those kinds of programs and conditions, and the easier it is for you to make choices and hear what you want rather than what you think you should want. This state too is really refreshing because you're basically like tapping into who you are. it would be the same as if you were playing, say you're doing your marathon acting. That's exhausting. And then someone was like, okay, break. And for like 5 minutes, you don't have to be your character. You get to put all your character's bullshit, all your character's soap opera drama down. And you get to sit on like the side of the stage and have, I don't know, some like nice lemonade. You're not associated with the activity on the stage in the same way. And that's really what God consciousness is. It's knowing you're not that stuff. You're the actor, not the character. And I also emphasize this type of practice, praying, meditation. It doesn't have to be, 2 hours with candles. I practice it every time I have to stand in line somewhere. Anytime I'm waiting at all, I try to get in line with God. Just 1 second. And it can be it's very healing. And yesterday or the Monday, I talked about healing, and healing is just rewriting programs, and the less programs, less ticker tape printouts you have scrolling around on your head, the easier it is, and the more space you have to really rejoice in the miracle of living, because this shit's wild. Like, there's so much beauty and so much love. It's all right here, and those things kind of hide it. So this practice can help you develop the awareness to connect to that presence. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Have a beautiful day.